Thank you, Hugh, for asking this. This is a very big question, and I think I'm going to answer with a story time rather than a poem. I started writing poetry as a joke for a friend back in 2021. She asked me to create a book of poetry for her birthday, her 30th birthday, and I did. And it was just like little silly poems and personal jokes. But it was also at a time where so much was shifting in my life. I had the previous year done an ayahuasca retreat, and that just flipped me. My father passed away suddenly. I was living in Melbourne, which was the most lockdown city in the world, and it was really grim. And just everybody was going through this crazy time. I mean, the world was, but Melbourne particularly was a dark place to be. And I was just shifting things in my life and seeing things differently. And as a result, the people that I was hanging around with, we were shifting apart. And that included the friend that I wrote poetry for, who was also a business partner. And yeah, I basically spoke my truth on how I was feeling, and everything in my life blew up at once. And it was a really, really dark night of the soul. But poetry was still very much forefront in my mind. And I started using that as a way to soothe myself, I guess. It was like the version of me that was writing the poem was my higher self, like my soul, my purest essence, and this aspect of me that wanted to guide me home and help me move towards the light and see that brighter days were ahead. So yeah, and it felt really magical and special. It also felt very instinctual. It was like the poems lived outside of me. I never thought of myself as much of a creative person. I hadn't done any creative writing since high school, which was like 12 years at the time. So suddenly to have this like creative outlet that felt so pure and amazing was just like mind-blowing to me. And it really helped me see that there's this level of consciousness that we have access to that is beyond the mind, because these poems felt like they were beyond the mind. I just always knew that they were finished, and I was just like bringing them through. I was like hearing them. Anyway, from there, I made I don't want to say deal, because I made a promise to God. It just felt like everything in my life had fallen apart because there was this book that I was meant to write. I just had this knowing that I was meant to write a book. And I said, okay, God, like, thank you. You've cleared out everything. I promise you I will write the book. I don't know what it is, but I will write it. So I was like thinking of ideas of like how to help people going through crisis. I kept writing poetry, exploring awakening, just exposing. I had been exposing myself to all like the conspiracies and the dark side of reality, and just basically studying as much as I could. I moved town. I basically left everything behind and started fresh in another state, where I quickly met my now partner. I made some beautiful friends. And then not long after moving here, I had this thought that maybe the book that I meant to write wasn't, self-help or nonfiction, but it was a fiction story. And then instantly, this idea that was fully formed sci-fi story beamed into my brain. I kid you not, like it was fully formed. And it was like all these pieces of the puzzle were just clicking into place. And the more I thought about it, the more that was revealed. Again, with that same thought that like this story already exists. I am simply the one that is bringing it through. And over the next 18 months, over the next few months, I tried to write this story like a normal novel. I even did a course on how to write a novel, but it just wasn't clicking. So I put it down, kept writing poetry, started sharing it online a lot on Instagram. And then when it was like 10 months since I'd had the idea, I suddenly thought, maybe the story is meant to be written in poetry. So I started doing that, and it just started flowing out. So this was my first book or epic poem, 2318, which is now episode 1 in my audio series, A Ticket to the Fifth Dimension. it took me 18 months to write that book. And then I fell in love with the process. And 4 more stories proceeded to come out from there. So, yeah. I guess what shifted it from becoming interest to becoming my passion and purpose, it was actually never an interest. It was like instantly my passion and purpose. It felt so right and so true. And I encourage anyone there, like even if it doesn't become your passion and purpose, but write a poem. Like it is so healing, revealing, magical, amazing. Anyway, seeing what can happen when you write a whole sci-fi series in poetry, the depth of what you can convey is incredible. And I feel like all of this just comes back to that promise that I made to God about writing the book. And I feel like sharing my poetry with you all, my ultimate goal, honestly, is to get this book series into your ears and into your hearts, because it is what God put me on this earth to do. So if you haven't yet, this is a very long-winded way to say, please go and listen to A Ticket to the Fifth Dimension. It's on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, basically wherever you get your podcasts. And yeah, there's 3 stories out at the moment, and there's 2 more coming by the end of the year. They're basically a story that reflects the process of awakening. I started off atheist. I had a spiritual awakening. I moved through New Age, understanding reality, understanding the power of intention, and then moved through into discovering Christ, the ultimate God consciousness in human form. But not, like I say God consciousness, but he is the Son of God. And these stories, there's so much intellectual and thought gymnastics that one has to go through to go from atheist through New Age into Christ. And I want my poetry to be able to guide people through that in a way that makes sense and is encouraging and inspiring and enlightening. And that's what these stories are. I don't know where it's going. Like, I do see them being a book one day. I would love to see them as musicals and movies. They're in rhyme, so they already lend themselves very well to song. And yeah, I love them so much, and I want everyone else to experience them too. Anyway, that's the story in a nutshell. Thanks for listening if you're still here. I'm a bit erratic, but how to tell this story is pretty difficult. How to explain the story is pretty difficult because there's so much in them. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. But thanks for your question, Hugh. I don't know if that answered it. Maybe did. Anyway, catch you later, guys.